Hi and welcome to the last video of this year and my December wrap up. I'm Øystein and I'm trying to become a bookworm, and I hope to inspire you to do the same. December has been an okay reading month for me. I read 4 books and the usual page count, which I try telling myself is okay, because each month I really want to read a lot more, but time isn't always on my side, especially not when filming these videos, which I love, so I want to be doing that as well. And for many people, December is a month where you either read a lot of books or you don't get time to read any. And I feel like I'm more in the latter category because there are so many things that should be done before Christmas and it just eats up my time. All in all, I'm pretty happy with the month, and I've been picking books that have been better for me this month, so I'm happy with that. The first book on the list is also a book that I've made a separate review of on my channel, so you can check that out if you want to, and it's The Promise by Damon Galgut. Of course, this year's Booker Prize winner, and a very much talked about book this year. Some of you mentioned that I should read it, and I have, and I do not regret reading it, but it wasn't the experience that I wished that it would be. In the book we meet a family of 5, and the mother of the family is dying. On her deathbed, the father gives the promise that he will give the house of the servant to the servant, and they have 3 kids, where the youngest one of the kids, the kid on the cover, overhears this promise being made, and later she confronts her father with the promise, but nothing is really done about the promise. This sparks conflict in the family. We also get to view the story from the different aspects of each family member, which also makes up each of their own plots, and each of the stories are tied together with significant happenings in South Africa, or big events happening, making the book more depthy, you could say. I would say that the big theme of the book is moral and human decay in general, and for South Africa it's about racism and how the country has developed from the 80s and until now, both in larger terms but also in small terms of what happens to the individuals in the book. I must say that the book just didn't really do it for me. I may be prone to liking more fast-paced book, because this really wasn't fast-paced, even though we cover a lot of people and a lot of time. I thought it was kind of slow, and I had huge expectations for her role in the book, which I just didn't feel was that significant. I could say that I didn't feel that much was significant in the book in general. I don't know, the book just didn't grip me. This may sound kind of dumb, but I could sort of recognize in the book that this part is supposed to be beautifully written, and I could see why, but if it can't touch my emotions when I read it, it's not beautiful to me. So there you have it. That was the first book I read, and sort of the only book that I felt that I had to read this month. And you might say that that doesn't really help my reading joy while reading, maybe. I read The Promise while on a trip, and my flight back got delayed, so I needed a book to read because I was finished. The choice stood between this next book and Red, White and Royal Blue, I think it's called, which seems to be immensely popular. And I thought I needed something light to read, so the easiest way of finding something light to read is something that's very, very popular, because that's often the most easily read books. And I ended up with this, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This book is an adaptation of Homer's Iliad, and it focuses on the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus. That's a name that I couldn't decide in my head how I should pronounce, so I just ended up calling him Mr. P. That sounded weird saying out loud. I haven't really thought about it until now, but that's at least what I called him in my head. Of course, if you know your history, this book is full of spoilers, so I'm kinda glad I had neglected that part of history lessons, because it made the story more interesting. Patroclus is a prince, and one day he accidentally kills the son of one of his father's noblemen. Because of this, he is exiled to Phthia, where Peleus rules, and Achilles is the son of Peleus. So this is where the two meet, and despite Patroclus being ordinary, or at least depicted as very ordinary in the book, not a world-class warrior as Achilles at least, and as sexy, because the book describes Achilles as the most sexy man ever to have existed on this earth. Anyway, they develop a friendship that leads into something much more than a friendship, and that's what the story is about. So the story begins with their friendship and ends up You should read the book, but most people say that this book is kind of sad, and I understand why. One of the big strengths of the book is how they portray the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus, especially because Achilles seems to be so much better than Patroclus, but after you read a while you sort of understand why they like each other, and Achilles can be viewed as a bit of a jerk, and sometimes is, but all in all you get that he is also a human being. And that's also very pointed out through the book, that he is not a god, he just seems like one. It's just one of the most beautiful books I've read, and how the book describes the relationship between those two men is just heartbreaking. I find it hard to pinpoint why it is in that way, but it's just so good at taking the everyday conversations and how they behave together and some of the dialogue, but I don't think it's the dialogue work that does it for me. It's more how they describe being with each other, what they feel when they're not together, and how they feel when the other person behaves like an idiot. As I mentioned earlier, if you know your history, you know that this book will have it all. The wars, the human suffering, the taboo, the love stories. It's a beautiful, beautiful book, and I really loved it. I actually gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and it was close to 5 stars, and I'm beginning to think that I'm being a little too harsh, because when I talk about it now, I realized that I really, really loved this book. I'll consider it a 5 stars. So when I finished this light read that I really enjoyed and had happy emotions around, I thought, why not ruin it by reading one more Booker Prize book? Well, that's not true. I really enjoy many of the Booker Prize books, but they're harder to digest than the other books. The next book is a book from an author who has a really strong name, and the name has just popped up everywhere since I started this Booktube channel, and that's Kazuo Ishiguro and Never Let Me Go. So I was really thinking about either reading Never Let Me Go or reading Remains of the Day, but I chose this one because many of the people say that Remains of the Day is even better. So when I was on my reading high, I could start reading this instead. So if I need a good book, I'll pick up Remains of the Day. My brain works in mysterious ways. This book is a dystopian sci-fi novel released in 2005. It's set in the 90s at a boarding school in England called Halesham. We actually start in the present where we meet Kathy, who is a carer, but we don't really know that much about what she does. And suddenly we're drawn back to the 90s and to the boarding school, where we sort of chronologically go through her life there. We don't really know that much about the school. We just know that art is very important, smoking is a taboo. The general feeling is that this sounds like a normal school, but it also doesn't sound like a normal school at all. And it's very good at revealing bits and bits of the story throughout the book, but it takes quite a lot of time before you actually understand what the plot is all about. You could say that all the students at the school have very specific goals to what their purpose in life is going to be, and no one can actually choose what they want to become, sort of. Many people describe this book as a coming-of-age novel, and of course Kathy goes to school and develops friendships and not so friendly ships. And she also has her sexual endeavors, and yeah, she's growing up. I thought the book started out being quite suspenseful, but it also started repeating itself sometimes. A part of the book is at the school and one part is what happens after school, and I thought the part being at school was too long. I sort of understand why it's done in this way, because so many significant things happen in school. It lays the foundation for the rest of the book, and it's a part of making it suspenseful because you only know too little all the time. But I'd still like to see more things happening outside of the school when they finish school. When I read about the book, I read that it was supposed to be a dystopian novel, and I sort of thought it would be more dystopian than it was. I would call it a slow burn dystopian novel, because it is dystopian, but it's dystopian in kind of a big way, so a societal big dystopian way. Also dystopian towards the single human beings, but I think I would react even more or engage even more with the book if the dystopian things in the novel was more closely tied into each individual, and I reform the relationship to the individual even more. The book, however, did make me want to read Remains of the Day even more. So written in a good way, written with a language I enjoyed. I also liked the things in the book. I just thought it was a little bit too long, or just things could have been different. I really enjoy the fact that I'm sitting here and complaining about world famous authors and how they didn't write the books that I wanted to read. Feels kind of stupid. The last book in this wrap up is a book that I've thought about reading since I started the channel, but only recently bought, and that's Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This book won the Women's Prize for Fiction this year, and Susanna Clarke is a name that has appeared when I was reading about Neil Gaiman. And since I love Neil Gaiman and he loves Susanna Clarke, it seems, I thought this might be an author for me. I thought actually I'd read something about Piranesi from Goodreads because I felt like it described it in a very good way. So you don't have to listen to me. Or you do have to listen to me, but not in that sense. Piranesi's house is no ordinary building. Its rooms are infinite, its corridors endless, its walls are lined with thousands upon thousands of statues, each one different from the others. Within the labyrinth of halls, an ocean is imprisoned. Waves thunder up staircases, rooms are flooded in an instant, but Piranesi is not afraid. He understands the tides as he understands the pattern of the labyrinth itself. He lives to explore the house. So in this book we meet Piranesi, which seems to be a very likable fellow, and he is very keen and interested in the things around him. In the house we also meet one other person, which is called the Other. So in the house there are just those two. And one day Piranesi discovers a new person, and things are slowly unraveling, you might say. The book is written like a diary, and we follow Piranesi's diary, and we also have some specific dates, so you sort of jump between the dates and the diary, and I really enjoyed that way of reading. So even though the book isn't written in a fast-paced way in the start, I nevertheless felt like it was. Like my relationship to Neil Gaiman's books, I feel like this book is just a display of great storytelling. It was so engaging, and right from the start I was sort of pulled into the house and the statues and the walls and the halls and all of the things that Piranesi is surrounded by. When the author manages to pull me into the author's arena, sort of, and manages to put me in Piranesi's house in this instant, I just love the reading experience as a whole, because I can visualize all the things happening to Piranesi, and thus I can picture it happening to myself, and I would love the read. The book is also witty at times, which I really appreciate and like, but I would say that it's just a very, very good fairy tale, and a well-written fairy tale at that. So happy with this read also. I gave this one as well 4 stars, still considering giving it 5 stars because I really enjoyed the read. It doesn't really matter what I give them. The thing that matters is my reading experience, which was exquisite. These were the 4 books that I read this month, and I'm very happy with them. I have 1 day left to read, so maybe I'll try reading some, but I doubt it, because life. Since this is my last video this year, I thought I'd just thank you all for commenting, liking, subscribing to my channel. I wouldn't have guessed that running a YouTube channel would be so pleasant when I started out, because you are all so wonderful. So thank you all for contributing to this channel, and I hope to see you all next year. Happy New Year! Bye!